I'm a 32-year-old woman, and I've always been the responsible one in my family. You know the type, reliable, dependable, the one who keeps things together when others don't. Meanwhile, my younger brother, Justin, who's 28, has always been the golden child. My mom practically treats him like he's some kind of saint, no matter what he does or doesn't do, more often than not. It's always been like this. Growing up, whenever Justin did something wrong, Mom would wave it off. "Oh, that's just how he is," she'd say. If I dared to get upset about it, her favorite line would follow, "Be the bigger person." That phrase became her go-to solution for everything, no matter how unfair the situation was. At first, I thought that's just how families worked, but over the years, it became clear Justin could do no wrong in her eyes. The breaking point came a couple of weeks ago at a family dinner. It started off fine, small talk, laughter, the usual. Then, out of nowhere, Justin made a comment about how I overthink everything. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said it, loud enough for everyone to hear, with that smug grin he always gets when he knows he's getting under my skin. The room went quiet for a moment, and I felt everyone's eyes on me. My cheeks burned, but I bit my tongue like I always do. That wasn't the first time Justin had embarrassed me in front of others. He has a long history of crossing lines. When we were kids, he once ruined a school science project I'd worked on for weeks, just because he was bored. Mom's response? He's just a kid. Let it go. As adults, he's taken it even further. A couple of years ago, he accidentally let slip about a job interview I was keeping private. I didn't get the job, and I can't help but wonder if his comments about my nerves during family gatherings had something to do with it. The thing is, Justin doesn't just stop at me. He's dodged family responsibilities his entire life. Whenever there's something hard to do, like helping dad fix something around the house, or showing up for a relative's birthday, it's always me, or someone else picking up the slack. Justin? He has a knack for disappearing just when he's needed, and yet somehow, he's still the golden child. Mom defends him at every turn, saying, he's just different, or he doesn't mean it. I've spent years playing nice, swallowing my pride for the sake of keeping the peace, as Mom puts it. But that dinner? That one little comment? It was the straw that broke the camel's back. I realized that night that I'd had enough. Enough of being humiliated, enough of being told to rise above, and enough of letting Justin walk all over me while Mom made excuses for him. What makes it worse is how the extended family sees him. To them, Justin is charming, funny, and easygoing. They don't see the passive-aggressive remarks or the way he conveniently avoids anything that doesn't suit him. Meanwhile, I get labeled as uptight or too serious. Dad sees it. So does my older cousin Julia. They've both quietly admitted that Justin gets away with too much, but they're too afraid to say anything in front of Mom. Rocking the boat isn't their style. The tipping point that night wasn't just Justin's comment. It was what Mom said afterward. I had barely managed to laugh it off when she leaned over and said, "Come on, you're the bigger person here. Let it go." That was it for me. It was like every time I'd been told to suck it up came rushing back all at once. I realized I was done playing the martyr. I spent the next few days reflecting on all the times Justin had crossed the line and how I'd let him get away with it. He'd taken credit for my ideas, embarrassed me in front of others, and even cost me opportunities, all while Mom stood by, telling me to be the bigger person. And for what? To keep the family dynamic intact? To avoid conflict? It was a dynamic that only seemed to benefit Justin. That's when I decided it was time to do something about it. I wasn't going to start a fight or cause a scene. That's not my style. But I needed to find a way to hold Justin accountable, to force him to acknowledge what he'd done. Not just to me, but to everyone who's had to pick up the pieces after him. For once, I wanted to see him apologize, genuinely apologize. And I wanted Mom to see it too. I didn't know exactly how I was going to pull it off, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let things slide this time. Justin might be the golden child, but even golden children have to face reality eventually. And this time, I wasn't going to be the one to be the bigger person. Update 1. After that dinner, I decided to start setting boundaries. Not just with Justin, but with everyone who had been complicit in letting him get away with his behavior. It began with small steps. The next morning, Justin casually messaged in our family group chat, making a joke about the previous night. He framed it as if his comment about me overthinking everything was just harmless fun, like it hadn't humiliated me in front of the entire family. This time, I didn't brush it off. I responded calmly, pointing out that his remark had been uncalled for. Justin reacted the way I expected, laughing it off with a series of relax. It's not that deep messages. The family chat went quiet after that. I could almost imagine the awkwardness on their faces as they read the exchange. Justin was used to me letting things slide. When I didn't, he seemed thrown off, but he didn't take it seriously. He probably assumed I'd get over it like always. Later that day, Mom called me. Her voice had that slightly exasperated tone she always uses when she's about to tell me to be the bigger person. She started in on how I should let the whole thing go for the sake of family unity. "You know how Justin is," she said. But instead of arguing, I simply told her I wasn't willing to ignore it anymore. I kept my tone calm and firm. There was a pause on her end, like she didn't know how to respond. I think she expected me to either argue or give in, but I did neither. That was my first small victory. A few days later, I learned there was a family dinner coming up at my aunt's house. It was one of those semi-regular gatherings where everyone shows up, cousins, uncles, family friends. These events were Justin's playground. He thrived on being the center of attention, charming everyone with his jokes and stories. I decided this was where I'd make my move. Before the dinner, Dad pulled me aside while I was visiting him and Mom. He told me he had noticed Justin's behavior, and that I wasn't wrong to call him out. He admitted he hadn't spoken up before, because he didn't want to cause tension, but he promised he'd back me up if things escalated. Hearing that gave me a quiet sense of relief. For once, I wouldn't feel completely alone in this. Meanwhile, Justin was his usual self, acting like nothing had happened. I overheard from my cousin Julia that he'd been joking behind my back, saying I was on one lately, and would cool off eventually. He wasn't taking any of this seriously, and that only solidified my resolve. I stopped engaging with him entirely in the lead up to the dinner. No sarcastic replies, no frustrated comebacks, just silence. It clearly unsettled him. At one point during a casual family meetup, he tried baiting me with a snide comment about how I'd been too busy for the family group chat. I just smiled politely and walked away. His smirk faltered, but he didn't push further. That moment told me I was on the right track. The day of the dinner arrived, and the house was buzzing with chatter and laughter. As expected, Justin was in his element, making jokes and basking in the attention. I played it cool, chatting with cousins and catching up with family I hadn't seen in a while. At one point, my aunt leaned in and quietly told me she'd noticed how Justin treated me over the years. "I've always thought you handled it better than I would," she said. That gave me a little extra confidence. When dinner was served, I made my move. The conversation naturally shifted to family memories, and I casually brought up the last dinner. I mentioned Justin's comment, framing it as a lighthearted question. "Hey Justin, remember when you said I overthink everything? What did you mean by that?" The table went quiet. Justin blinked, clearly caught off guard. He tried to laugh it off, saying I was making it a bigger deal than it was. But I didn't let it slide. I calmly asked if he thought it was okay to make personal remarks at someone else's expense. The atmosphere turned tense. Justin stammered, trying to downplay the situation, but his usual charm wasn't working. Mom looked uncomfortable, shifting in her seat. A few of my cousins avoided eye contact, while others looked like they were waiting to see how it would play out. Justin finally muttered a half-hearted apology, something about not meaning anything by it. It was insincere, but it was a start. I accepted it gracefully, not wanting to escalate things further, but I think everyone could tell I wasn't completely satisfied. The awkward silence hung in the air for a few seconds before someone quickly changed the subject. Still, the damage was done. Justin had been forced to apologize in front of everyone, a first, as far as I could remember. And for once, I didn't feel like the one who had to swallow her pride. Update 2. The aftermath of the dinner unfolded faster than I expected. The next morning, Mom called me, and I could tell from her tone she was furious. She didn't waste any time before accusing me of making a scene the night before. According to her, my little comment about Justin's behavior had embarrassed the family. She didn't mention Justin's actions leading up to it, just that I had overstepped by bringing it up in front of everyone. I stayed calm. I reminded her of all the times Justin had embarrassed me, hurt me, or caused problems for others, and how she always brushed it off. She didn't like that. She tried to argue, but I could hear her hesitation. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't angry, I was just laying out the facts. When she realized I wasn't backing down, she hung up with a frustrated, "We'll talk about this later." Apparently, Justin didn't waste any time either. Over the next couple of days, I started hearing from cousins and aunts, all with variations of the same message: "What's going on with you and Justin?" Turns out he'd started a campaign to make himself look like the victim. He told them I had been acting out lately, and that I was trying to create drama in the family. He even brought up old childhood incidents, twisting the stories to make it seem like I'd always been the difficult one. Not everyone bought it, though. A couple of cousins messaged me privately to say they'd noticed Justin's behavior for years and thought it was about time someone called him out. Others, though, clearly believed him, or at least didn't want to get involved. The family was splitting into quiet factions, and it was obvious at our next casual meetup. Conversations felt strained, and people avoided bringing up the dinner entirely. The real shock came from Dad. At a small family gathering, someone made an offhand comment about how touchy things had been lately. Before I could say anything, Dad spoke up. He calmly told the room that Justin's behavior had been unacceptable for years and that I was right to call it out. You could have heard a pin drop. Justin froze, looking like he'd just been slapped, and Mom's face went pale. She tried to laugh it off, but Dad didn't let her. "It's time we stopped pretending like this isn't a problem," he said. For the first time in years, someone had publicly stood up for me, and it wasn't just anyone, it was Dad. Justin's response was as dramatic as you'd expect. He stormed out of the room, muttering about how no one in the family appreciated him. Mom went after him, leaving everyone else in an awkward silence. Later, I heard from Julia that Justin had gone on a rant to her about how I was ruining his life and turning the family against him. She told me it was ridiculous, but it still stung knowing he was escalating things instead of owning up. Mom doubled down, of course. She called me again a few days later, this time with an almost pleading tone. "Justin didn't mean it like that," she said. "He's just feeling overwhelmed right now." She even brought up some financial struggles he'd been having, as if that excused his behavior. When I didn't budge, she got defensive. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she snapped. "Do you really want to break up the family over this?" That was my breaking point. I told her, as calmly as I could, that I wouldn't be attending any more family gatherings unless Justin apologized, and not just some muttered, insincere apology like the one at the dinner. It had to be genuine, and it had to include acknowledgement of what he'd done. If that didn't happen, I was done. Mom didn't take it well. She accused me of being dramatic, selfish, and a host of other things I've heard 100 times before. But I didn't back down. Word of my ultimatum spread quickly. Some family members were shocked. Others quietly reached out to say they understood. A few even shared their own stories of Justin's behavior over the years. One cousin told me about a time Justin had sabotaged a project they were working on together and never apologized. An uncle mentioned how Justin had borrowed money from him and never paid it back. It seemed like once the floodgates opened, everyone had something to say. Justin, of course, tried to spin it. He called me one evening, claiming he wanted to fix things, but it quickly became clear it was just another manipulation attempt. His apology was filled with backhanded comments like, "I'm sorry if you felt hurt, and I guess I didn't realize you were so sensitive." I ended the call before he could finish. If anything, that fake olive branch just made things worse. Mom wasn't done either. She called me one last time with an ultimatum of her own. "Either you let this go, or you're going to tear this family apart." I responded with my own, no real apology, no relationship. She didn't take that well, but I think it finally sank in that I wasn't going to cave this time. The fallout was messy. Justin had another meltdown, this time blaming Mom for not fixing the situation. Mom was visibly exhausted, caught between defending Justin and dealing with the growing tension in the family. Meanwhile, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time, I wasn't the one bending over backward to make things right. Update 3. After my ultimatum, Justin kicked his manipulation into high gear. He started calling and texting extended family members, painting himself as the victim. I heard from one of my cousins that Justin was telling people I had completely lost it and was out to ruin the family. His version of events conveniently skipped over the years of his bad behavior and focused solely on how harsh I'd been lately. Apparently, I was being unreasonable and trying to turn everyone against him. Then came the social media posts. Justin wasn't outright naming me, but anyone who knew us could connect the dots. He'd post vague things like, "Crazy how some people will twist the truth to make themselves look better," and family is supposed to be about love, not grudges. His friends, most of whom didn't know the full story, flooded the comments with sympathy, calling him so strong and telling him to stay positive. It was irritating, but I ignored it. Engaging would only add fuel to the fire, and that's exactly what he wanted. Things hit a boiling point in the family group chat. Justin posted a snarky comment clearly aimed at me, something about how some people can't let go of the past and how holding grudges ruins families. A few relatives chimed in with neutral comments, but I stayed silent. That's when Dad stepped in. He wrote a straightforward message calling out Justin for stirring up drama. He reminded everyone of the dinner where Justin had been forced to apologize and said it was time to stop pretending there wasn't a real issue here. The chat exploded. Justin immediately accused Dad of playing favorites, claiming he'd always felt less loved compared to me. It was a wild accusation, considering how much Mom has coddled him his whole life. But Justin played it up, saying he'd never stood a chance in our family. A couple of relatives backed him up, saying Dad was being too harsh, while others stayed silent or sent private messages to me expressing their support. The group chat stayed tense for days, with people arguing back and forth until it finally died down. Meanwhile, Mom wasn't helping. She messaged me privately, doubling down on her claim that I was dividing the family. According to her, I was forcing people to pick sides and putting her in an impossible position. She couldn't see, or wouldn't see, that Justin's actions were the root of the problem, not mine. When I pointed this out, she got defensive and accused me and Dad of ganging up on Justin. It felt like a losing battle until our next family dinner. My aunt, the same one who had quietly supported me before, finally spoke up. Justin was telling some story about how he'd been misunderstood when my aunt interrupted him. She didn't yell or get angry. She just calmly pointed out how often Justin seemed to misunderstand people, and how convenient it was that it always left him looking like the victim. The room went silent. Justin's face turned red, and for a moment he was completely thrown off. Then he mumbled something about not wanting to argue and stormed out of the room. It was the first time I'd seen him genuinely embarrassed, and it was clear from the looks on everyone's faces that my aunt's words had hit a nerve. After that dinner, more relatives started reaching out to me. Some shared stories of their own experiences with Justin, how he'd borrowed money and never paid it back, or how he'd bailed on commitments and left them to pick up the slack. It seemed like once someone else had the courage to speak up, the floodgates opened. The narrative was starting to shift, and Justin was losing the control he'd always had over family dynamics. But Justin wasn't done. He hosted a small gathering with mutual family friends, and from what I heard, he used it as a stage to air his grievances about me. He framed me as bitter, jealous, and out to punish him for no reason. A couple of family friends even called me afterward to ask what was going on. I calmly explained my side of the story and made it clear that I wasn't interested in bad-mouthing Justin, but was simply standing up for myself after years of his behavior. I think my refusal to engage publicly frustrated Justin even more. By this point, family lines were clearly drawn. Some relatives were avoiding gatherings altogether, while others quietly showed their support for me. The tension was impossible to ignore. That's when Mom decided to arrange a peace talk at her house. She called me, insisting that we all needed to sit down and work things out for the sake of the family. I told her flatly that I wasn't interested unless Justin was ready to offer a real apology. She tried to argue, but I stood firm. The peace talk happened without me, and from what I heard, it didn't go well. Justin apparently spent most of it complaining about how he was being attacked, while Mom tried to mediate and failed miserably. Dad, to his credit, didn't back down. He reiterated that Justin needed to take responsibility for his actions, but without me there, the whole thing devolved into a blame game. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. The situation was messy, but I wasn't the one scrambling to keep the peace anymore. Justin might still be trying to spin the story, but the cracks in his golden child image were starting to show, and I wasn't about to let him patch them up so easily. Update 4. Not long after the so-called peace talk flopped, cracks in Justin's perfect image started to show, and it didn't take long for everyone to notice. The first hint came from an unexpected source, my cousin Julia. She mentioned in passing that Justin had been asking around for a loan. At first, I brushed it off as typical Justin behavior, but then I started hearing the same story from other relatives. Turns out, Justin was in financial trouble. Bad trouble. He'd been relying on Mom to cover his bills, and it was getting harder for her to keep it under wraps. The golden child wasn't as untouchable as everyone thought. Mom tried to spin it. She pulled me aside one evening, saying Justin was going through a tough time, and that I needed to cut him some slack. She went on about how stressed he was and how he just needed support. I let her finish, then calmly reminded her that past struggles didn't excuse years of bad behavior. If anything, the way he handled tough times only made it clearer why boundaries were necessary. Mom didn't like that answer, but for once, she didn't argue. Justin, of course, didn't take this quietly. He doubled down on his manipulation, telling anyone who'd listen that I was being cruel by holding a grudge. But here's where things got interesting. People were starting to push back. A few relatives who'd stayed neutral until now began calling Justin out directly. At one family gathering, an uncle openly told Justin that his constant deflection and excuses were getting old. The look on Justin's face was priceless. He wasn't used to being challenged, and it was clear he didn't know how to handle it. As more people started to see through Justin's behavior, his usual allies began to distance themselves. The same cousins who used to laugh at his jokes now avoided engaging with him. Family gatherings became awkward, with Justin sitting off to the side, visibly uncomfortable. It was subtle at first, but over time, his isolation grew. For the first time, Justin was facing the consequences of his actions, and it wasn't just coming from me. Then came the health scare. Mom had a minor issue that required a short hospital stay. It wasn't serious, but it was enough to get everyone in the family to rally around her. Justin saw it as his opportunity. At the hospital, he started hinting, loudly, that this was the perfect time for me to let bygones be bygones. He made sure everyone could hear him, playing up the role of the concerned son who just wanted peace in the family. I stayed calm. I made it clear that while I was concerned for Mom, I wasn't going to use the situation as an excuse to ignore the bigger issue. That didn't sit well with Justin, who tried to guilt me by saying things like, family should come first. I didn't take the bait. Under pressure from relatives, Justin offered another half-hearted apology during one of Mom's hospital visits. It was as vague as ever, something about how he didn't mean to upset anyone. I looked him straight in the eye and called it out for what it was. If he couldn't acknowledge what he'd actually done, it wasn't a real apology. The room went quiet, and Justin looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. After that, something shifted. More relatives started reaching out to me privately, expressing their support. Some even apologized for not backing me up sooner. One cousin admitted she'd always been intimidated by Justin's charm but had long suspected there was more to the story. The more people spoke up, the more obvious it became that Justin's golden child status was crumbling. But Justin wasn't giving up without a fight. He tried to stir up drama about an unrelated family matter, bringing up old grievances and trying to pit relatives against each other. It didn't work. Most people saw through it, and instead of regaining control, he only made himself look worse. Even Mom, who had always been his biggest defender, started showing signs of frustration. I overheard her telling him to tone it down after one particularly unnecessary outburst. Meanwhile, I was starting to feel more confident. For the first time, I wasn't tiptoeing around family dynamics or bending over backward to keep the peace. I could see the respect growing, not just from relatives who supported me, but even from those who had stayed neutral. It felt like a turning point. Then came the biggest surprise. One of my aunts, who had always been firmly on the sidelines, reached out to me directly. She apologized for not speaking up sooner and admitted she'd seen Justin's behavior for what it was but didn't want to rock the boat. Her words were simple but meaningful, and it felt like yet another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Justin was still trying to maintain control, but the balance had shifted. His usual tactics weren't working anymore, and he was running out of allies. Mom was exhausted, the family was divided, and Justin was being held accountable in a way he'd never experienced before. For once, it felt like the golden child's armor was finally cracking, and there was no patching it up. Update 5. The breaking point came when Justin demanded a family meeting. He'd had enough of what he called the drama and wanted to fix things. It was clear he wasn't coming from a place of genuine remorse. He just wanted to regain control of the narrative. Mom was immediately on board, pressuring me to attend and be open to reconciliation. I agreed but made my conditions crystal clear. I would attend only if Justin gave a public, genuine apology that addressed specific past actions. No vague "I'm sorry if you felt hurt" nonsense. The day of the meeting felt tense even before it began. Mom had gathered everyone at her house. Dad was sitting quietly in the corner, observing but clearly on my side. Mom fluttered around nervously, trying to keep things light, while Justin sat at the table with his arms crossed, clearly irritated. A few relatives who had been supportive of me were present, along with some neutral ones who had shown up out of curiosity. As soon as we started, Justin launched into a monologue about how he felt attacked and abandoned. He claimed he was trying his best but that no one appreciated him. It didn't take long for the rant to turn into finger-pointing, accusing me of blowing things out of proportion and making him the scapegoat. He even threw in a jab at Dad, saying he'd always felt like the outsider in the family. When Justin finished, the room was silent. All eyes turned to me. I stayed calm and began recounting specific incidents where Justin's actions had caused harm, not just to me but to others in the family as well. I didn't raise my voice or get emotional. I simply laid out the facts, one after another. The ruined science project, the sabotage job interview, the countless times he'd shirked responsibilities and left others to clean up his mess. By the time I finished, Justin looked visibly uncomfortable. For once, he had nothing to say. The shift in the room was palpable. Relatives who had stayed neutral started nodding in agreement, and a few even chimed in with their own stories. My cousin Julia spoke up about how Justin had borrowed money from her and never paid it back. An uncle mentioned how Justin had bailed on helping him with a family event, leaving him scrambling at the last minute. It was like the floodgates opened, and all the things people had kept quiet about for years were finally coming to light. Mom, who had been sitting silently up until this point, looked shaken. For the first time, she admitted that she hadn't handled things fairly over the years. She said she thought she was keeping the peace by asking me to be the bigger person, but now she realized she'd only been enabling Justin's behavior. It was a reluctant admission, but it was a start. Under pressure from the entire room, Justin finally broke. He had a meltdown, accusing everyone of ganging up on him and claiming he'd always been the black sheep. But this time, no one let him off the hook. Even Mom, his staunchest defender, told him he needed to take responsibility for his actions. Justin, cornered and out of excuses, offered a tearful apology. It wasn't perfect, but it was genuine enough to feel like progress. He acknowledged the hurt he'd caused and admitted that he'd taken advantage of the family's patience. I accepted his apology but made it clear that rebuilding trust would take time. This wasn't about holding a grudge, it was about ensuring that the cycle of enabling and excuses stopped for good. Justin nodded, and for once he seemed to actually mean it. Over the next few weeks, Justin made small but meaningful gestures to repair the relationship. He apologized to Julia for not repaying her and set up a plan to pay back what he owed. He offered to help our uncle with an upcoming family event. He even reached out to me privately to apologize again, this time without any prompting or witnesses. It felt like he was finally starting to take accountability, not just for my sake but for himself. The family dynamic began to shift. Relatives who had once stayed silent started holding Justin accountable. When he tried to make excuses or deflect, they called him out. It wasn't harsh, it was firm but fair. Mom, too, made an effort to stop enabling him. She apologized to me for dismissing my feelings in the past and started treating me with more respect. Dad remained a quiet but steady source of encouragement. He never made a big show of taking sides, but his support was clear in the way he backed me up during family discussions and subtly encouraged Justin to keep making amends. As for Justin, he started showing signs of genuine growth. He still had a long way to go, but the effort was there. He apologized to other family members he'd hurt and started showing up for responsibilities he would have ignored in the past. He even admitted, during a casual conversation, that he'd been too wrapped up in his own world to realize how much damage he was causing. Things aren't perfect, and they might never be. But for the first time, I feel like there's a sense of fairness and respect in our family. I'm no longer the one carrying the burden of keeping the peace, and Justin is finally learning what it means to be accountable. It's not the ending I expected, but it's one I can live with, and that feels like a victory in itself.